Last August, my Amish neighbor Daniel pulled tomatoes off 4 plants for 3 weeks straight, while mine slowed to a trickle. Same variety, same soil, more or less. The difference was the way he handled the plant in June and July. Most American gardeners, myself included for the better part of 30 years, let a tomato grow however it wants and hope for the best. Daniel doesn't. He prunes with a purpose, and the result is heavier fruit, earlier ripening, and far less disease. I'm going to show you exactly what he does in 4 steps you can use on a single plant this weekend. And stick around to the end because I'll share what Daniel does with the pieces he prunes off so nothing goes to waste. Let me give you the number that stuck with me. Last August, Daniel picked ripe tomatoes off 4 plants for 3 weeks straight. Same variety I was growing. Same soil, more or less, just across the field. While his kept coming, mine slowed to a trickle by the middle of the month. That gap wasn't luck. It was the way he handled those plants back in June and July. Here's the thing. Most American gardeners, and I did this for the better part of 30 years, let a tomato grow into a big tangled bush and hope for the best. The problem is a plant left alone spends most of its energy making leaves and chasing endless new growth. It's busy, it's green, but it's not fattening and ripening the fruit you actually want to eat. Daniel does it differently. He prunes with a purpose, and I'm going to walk you through exactly what he does in 4 steps. Step 1, you'll learn to read your own plant. Step 2, we handle the suckers. Step 3, we strip the lower leaves. And step 4, we top the plant at just the right moment. Every one of these you can do on a single plant this weekend. And stick with me to the end because Daniel wastes nothing. I'll show you what he does with the pieces he prunes off so not a single cutting hits the compost. Step 1, read your own plant. Before you cut a single thing, you need to know what kind of tomato you're standing in front of because pruning the wrong type will cost you fruit instead of giving you more. There are 2 kinds. Determinate tomatoes grow to a set size, set all their fruit in a short window, and then they're done. Indeterminate tomatoes keep growing and keep setting fruit all season long, right up until the frost takes them. Daniel only prunes the indeterminate ones. I asked him once why he left a whole row of his paste tomatoes alone, and he said, "Those ones already know when to stop, Bill. No sense arguing with them." That stuck with me. A determinate plant carries its whole harvest on the growth it makes early, so if you go in cutting stems off, you're cutting off the very tomatoes you were waiting on. Leave them be. Check the tag the plant came with or watch the habit for a week. If it keeps climbing and climbing with no end in sight, it's indeterminate, and that's the one you'll be working on. Now, finding the suckers. This is the piece most American gardeners have never had pointed out to them, myself included, for 30 years. A tomato plant has a main stem, and off that main stem grow the branches that carry leaves and flowers. In the crotch where a branch meets the main stem, a third shoot pushes out at a 45-degree angle. That little shoot is the sucker. Left alone, every sucker becomes a whole new stem with its own branches, its own suckers, its own demands. That's how one tidy plant turns into the tangled bush I used to grow. The first time Daniel showed me, he just reached in with 2 fingers and pointed. "There," he said, "and there, and there." Once you see them, you can't unsee them. By the end of that afternoon, I was finding a dozen on a single plant. The win here is simple. You can now look at your own tomato, name it, and spot every sucker on it. That's something you couldn't do 5 minutes ago, and it's the whole foundation of everything that comes next. Step 2, remove the suckers. Daniel's rule is to bring each indeterminate plant down to 1 or 2 main stems and keep it there all season. Not 3, not 5, 1 or 2. Everything else, the suckers, comes off. The way you do it matters. When a sucker's small, under about 4 inches long, you pinch it off with your thumb and forefinger. It snaps clean, leaves a tiny wound, the plant heals over in a day, and you've lost nothing. Daniel doesn't even reach for his pruners on the little ones. He pinches as he walks, and that's the second half of this step. Timing. You don't prune suckers once and call it done. They keep coming all through June and July, so you check the plant every week. Daniel does it on his morning walk, coffee in one hand, the other hand pinching as he goes. He's been gardening that same plot for over 50 years, and he still walks it every single morning, not working, just looking. He told me, "You can't tend what you don't see, Bill, and you can't see unless you're quiet." A weekly pass is all it takes. 5 minutes a plant. Here's where most people mess up. They forget about the suckers or they get busy and 3 weeks go by. Now that sucker isn't 4 inches, it's 6 or 8, thick as a pencil with its own branches and maybe a flower cluster starting. Snap that off and then you've torn a wound the size of your thumbnail into the main stem. That big open wound is an invitation. Fungal spores and bacteria walk right in, and on a humid Lancaster County summer afternoon, that's exactly how disease gets a foothold. On top of that, the plant already poured weeks of energy into growing that that sucker, energy that should have gone into fruit, and now you're throwing it on the ground. So the fix is discipline, not heroics. Catch them small, pinch weekly. If you do find a big one, use a clean blade rather than ripping it, and wipe the blade before you move to the next plant. Daniel sharpens his pruners every Saturday evening on a whetstone, hand-forged tools from a blacksmith right here in Lancaster County, and he wipes them between plants the way some folks wash their hands. It's not fussiness, it's how he keeps a problem on one plant from becoming a problem on all of them. Now here's the part that took me 20 years to understand. The reason this step matters so much. A tomato plant only makes so much energy in a day. That's a fixed budget. Every leaf, every stem, every flower, every fruit is drawing from the same account. When you let a plant run wild with a dozen stems and 40 suckers, that energy gets spread thin across a mountain of foliage, and each individual tomato gets just a small slice. When you bring the plant down to 1 or 2 stems, you're not starving it, you're focusing it. All that same energy now pours into a handful of fruit clusters instead of being scattered across leaves you'll never eat. That's the mechanism behind heavier fruit. It's not magic, and it's not a special variety. Daniel's tomatoes come off the vine heavier because the plant is concentrating, not chasing. The first summer I finally did this right, I picked up one of my tomatoes and actually felt the difference in my hand. Same seed I'd always grown, denser, heavier, and I understood standing there in the garden that I'd been spreading my plants too thin for 3 decades without ever knowing it. Step 3, strip the lower leaves off the bottom of the plant. Once your tomato has set its first fruit cluster on that first little group of green tomatoes low on the main stem, everything below that cluster is doing you almost no good. I want you to take those lower leaves off, working your way up from the ground to about 12 inches. Pinch them or snip them clean against the stem. Do it on a dry morning, never when the foliage is wet, and you'll see the bottom foot of the plant open up into bare stem with a clear gap of air underneath the canopy. For 30 years, I left all that lower foliage on because it seemed wrong to take leaves off a plant that was working to feed me. Then one summer, I watched Daniel move down his row on a dry June morning, stripping the bottom of every plant, and I asked him why. He said, "The trouble always comes up from the ground, Bill. I just don't give it a ladder." Here's the mechanism behind far less disease. The 2 worst tomato diseases most American gardeners fight, early blight and septoria leaf spot, live in the soil as fungal spores. When rain or your watering can hit bare dirt, it splashes those spores up onto the lowest leaves, and from there, the infection climbs. Strip that bottom foot away, and the splash has nothing to land on. On top of that, opening the base of the plant lets air move straight through. Wet leaves are where fungus takes hold, and a leaf that dries by mid-morning almost never gets sick. Daniel's plants dry fast because the breeze runs right through the bottom of them. Now here's where most people overdo it. Stripping the lower foot is right. Stripping the whole plant naked is a mistake. If you tear off the upper leaves and expose your green tomatoes to direct afternoon sun, you'll get sun scald. Pale, leathery patches that ruin the fruit. Keep the canopy above the fruit intact. The leaves up top are the plant's sugar factory. The leaves down low are just a disease risk. The win at the end of step 3 is a plant with a clean, open base, dry foliage, and fruit that ripens without rotting from the ground up. Step 4, top the plant in late July. This is the one that took me the longest to trust. Topping means cutting off the very top growing tip of the plant, the part that keeps reaching for the sky and making new growth. Around the last week of July, I find the topmost fruit cluster that's already set, and I cut the main stem just above it. That's it. You're telling the plant it's done growing taller, and it's time to finish what it already started. The timing matters, and it's tied to your frost date. My first frost here in Lancaster County lands right around October 15th to the 20th. So the rule Daniel taught me is to make that final top about 4 weeks before the first frost, once the nights start to cool. I asked Daniel why he bothers, since the plant looks healthy and full. He said, after a point, every new flower is a promise the season can't keep. Here's the mechanism behind earlier ripening. A tomato plant will keep setting new flowers and new fruit right up until frost kills it. And all those late tomatoes never have time to ripen. They're a drain. They pull sugars away from the fruit already hanging on the vine. When you top the plant, you cut off that endless ambition, and the plant stops feeding new growth. All that sugar gets redirected into the green tomatoes already there. They size up faster and they color up earlier. That's exactly why Daniel was picking ripe fruit for 3 weeks straight last August, while mine were still sitting green and stubborn. The failure mode here is topping too early. If you cut the growing tip back in June when the plant still has months of productive weather ahead, you'll stunt your total yield. You've shut the factory down before it built its inventory. Wait until late July when the plant has set a full load of fruit, and only then top it. I'll be honest with you, the first time I cut the top clean off a tall, healthy tomato plant, it felt like a mistake. My hand actually hesitated. 30 years of habit was telling me more plant means more food. But Daniel was standing right there, and he just nodded at me to do it. 3 weeks later, that plant had ripe fruit on it while my untopped row down the other end of the garden was still green. That was the season I stopped arguing with him about it. What ties all 4 of these steps together is something I only understood after years of watching Daniel. He's been gardening this same plot for more than 50 years, and every morning he walks it with a cup of coffee before he touches a single plant. He doesn't prune on a schedule, he prunes on what he sees. When he does cut, he uses a pair of hand-forged pruners a blacksmith over in Lancaster made for him, and he wipes the blade with a rag between every single plant. I used to think that was fussiness. It isn't. It's the difference between a man who's done this 50 years and a man who spent 30 fighting his garden. Pruning, the way Daniel does it, isn't an attack on the plant. It's a conversation with it. Now, if what I'm walking you through here is making sense, I want to point something out. Opening up a tomato plant like this is only half the job. Pruning exposes the fruit, and the pests that go after tomatoes, hornworms, aphids, whiteflies, still show up. If you're tired of fighting the same pests every single season and you want a system instead of another quick tip, I put Daniel's full tomato prevention and intervention routine in Chapter 8 of my book, the 30-day Amish Pest-Proof Garden Protocol. It's $17 at backyardbuildbooks.com. If you're watching on your TV, go ahead and grab your phone and point it at the QR code on screen. Take your time. I'll wait right here while you find it. If you're on a phone or laptop, that's backyardbuildbooks.com. All right, let's keep going. Before we get to that bonus, let me save you from the 3 mistakes I see most often, and the first 2 are ones I made myself. The first mistake is pruning a determinate variety as if it were indeterminate. I told you back at the start that determinate tomatoes set their whole crop in one short window. When you go in and strip the suckers off one of those, you're cutting off the very stems that carry that single concentrated harvest. I did this to a row of paste tomatoes one year and cut my own yield down to almost nothing and wondered all summer why the plants looked so bare. The fix is simple. Check the seed tag or the plant's habit before you cut. If it's determinate, leave it alone. Pruning is for the tall, sprawling, indeterminate types only. The second mistake is pruning with dirty tools or on wet foliage. Tomato diseases spread through water and through the cuts you make. And if you move down the row with a sappy blade on a damp morning, you're carrying fungus and bacteria from a sick plant straight into a healthy one through every open wound. I watched my own plants go down like dominoes one July before I understood that. The fix is the one Daniel taught me. Prune on a dry morning and wipe your blade or your fingers between every plant. It takes 10 extra seconds and it stops disease cold. The third mistake is over pruning. Once folks learn that pruning helps, they tend to get carried away and strip the plant down to a bare stick. Take too much foliage and 2 things happen. Your fruit gets sun scalded from the exposed sun and the plant loses the upper leaves it needs to make sugar. A naked plant is a starving plant. The fix is to never remove more than about 1/3 of the leaves at any one time and always keep a healthy canopy above the fruit. You're opening the plant up, not shaving it bald. I told you at the start I'd show you what Daniel does with the pieces he prunes off so nothing goes to waste. And this is the part that genuinely surprised me. For 30 years, every sucker and cutting I pinched off went straight onto the compost pile and I never thought twice about it. Daniel doesn't throw a single one away. He turns them into brand new tomato plants. Here's how he does it. When he's pinching suckers, he sets aside the healthiest ones on the firm green shoots about 4 to 6 inches long. He strips the lower leaves off each one, then either drops it in a jar of water on a windowsill or pushes it straight into moist soil in a shaded corner where the afternoon sun won't cook it. That's it. In 7 to 10 days, that little sucker grows its own roots. Then he transplants it out into the garden, and because it's getting a late start, it ripens later, giving him a second younger crop that carries his harvest right into fall. Here's why it works, and it's the part most American gardeners never learn. If you look closely at a tomato stem, you'll see tiny bumps running along it. Those are adventitious root primordia, root cells already waiting to grow. That's why a tomato will root from almost any piece of stem. And because that sucker is a genetic clone of the parent plant, the new plant grows the exact same tomato you already know, free plants from the material you were about to throw on the pile. I asked Daniel once how many plants he started this way. He just said, "Why would I buy what the plant gives me for nothing?" He was right. The first year I tried it, I rooted 6 new plants from my cuttings, and they fed us straight through October. Before I let you go, I want to come back to one thing. When these 4 steps work, you're going to have more ripe tomatoes coming in at once than you know what to do with. And that's its own kind of problem. The folks who taught me this solved it generations ago. In chapter 10 of my book, The 30-Day Amish Pest-Proof Garden Protocol, I walk through Ruth's root cellar and her putting by methods, exactly how Daniel's wife stores and preserves a heavy harvest so it feeds the family through winter. If you respect the old, proven wisdom and you want the whole system in one place, you'll find the book at backyardbillbooks.com. If you're on your TV, grab your phone and scan the QR code on screen. No rush. Take a moment to find it. If you're on a phone or laptop, the link's right there in the description. So that's it. Prune with purpose in 4 steps. Read the plant, pinch the suckers, strip the lower leaves, and top it in late July. And you get heavier fruit, earlier ripening, and far less disease. That's how Daniel pulled tomatoes off 4 plants for 3 weeks straight last August, while mine slowed to a trickle. These aren't tricks I dreamed up. They're the same quiet methods running on a few hundred Amish farms across Lancaster County right now, the same way Daniel's been doing it for 50 years on the same plot of ground. And now you're in on something most American gardeners never learn. If you want to go further, take a look at how Daniel keeps the soil alive without a rototiller. That's the foundation under all of this. Try these 4 steps on a single plant this season and drop a note in the comments to let me know how it goes. I'll see you in the next one.